You may have noticed earlier this week they came out with the sentencing for Ghislaine Maxwell. How do I say it?
I don't know.
It comes up on the radio show every day. I still don't know how to pronounce it. That Maxwell lady, the Epstein lady. They came out with her sentencing. She got 20 years. But this was a different kind of case. This was a federal criminal case. There's differences. Criminal versus state is just different. And you wonder why some of these trials I see, there's no video and you see the artist rendering of the defendant. Why is that? Who better to ask than our resident criminal defense guru, Rajan Joshi is here. Rajan, how are you, buddy?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Now, this guy here, I've heard about a million times, too. You got to introduce me to the powerful man next to you.
All right, this legend is Rick Jancha. Rick and I were former law partners at Nijame Law for about 8 years. Rick has more experience as a federal criminal defense attorney than any attorney I know, going on close to 45 years. 22 years as a U.S. prosecutor. And as a U.S. prosecutor, he actually ran the Orlando office. He was the managing partner over there. And then they assigned him to oversee all the drug cases, all the narcotic cases in the federal middle district, which includes 35 counties.
That's even Tampa.
Yes, Tampa. Yes,
it's crazy.
Yes, it encompasses most of Florida. And Rick and I have worked many cases. We've represented politicians, doctors, CEOs of companies across the state and even different states. And we've always gotten, really, really excellent results. And so I had to bring him on the show. He's of counsel with my law firm. We work together. We've worked together for years since, I opened up my law firm. And today's my 7-year anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
7 years. My goodness. It flew by, though, huh?
It really did.
Yeah.
It really did. Time does fly.
Rick, welcome, buddy.
Thank
We're
you.
honored to have you here. But let's go back to this Ghislaine Maxwell. Am I saying it right? Do you know either? I don't know. Whatever. So in federal cases, what we always see is when there's media coverage, there's always a drawing of the defendant.
That's not fan art?
I don't think
it was
so.
fan art.
Could be. Why is that? Why do we not allow cameras in federal courts?
It's just a decision by the federal judiciary.
Really?
They made the decision that they don't want to turn federal cases into a media circus. Like you see in a lot of state cases, they don't want, if it's publicized, on the news or whatever, then there's a possibility of influencing jurors, that type of thing. So the federal court's very strict and keeps very, very tight control over their proceedings. And they made the decision
Not to
no
allow
cameras. They don't even allow cell phones in the federal court,
they're little lockers
except for
outside.
attorneys.
Yeah.
But the average person can't even take a cell phone like they can in state court.
I often hear the saying or the phrase, the federal government would indict a ham sandwich. What does that mean? Is there any truth to that rumor?
No. The federal system is so much different than the state. In the state and in the federal system, an officer can arrest someone. But in the federal, and then the prosecutor in the state court decides on the charges. In the federal system, everybody's got to be indicted by a federal grand jury of any type of criminal offense. They can, if they agree, file what's called an information, where they agreed to plead guilty and they agree that what they did, and they can do it that way. And then that has to be approved by a judge. But as a general rule, federal courts all got to be indicted by a grand jury. The reason they say that they can indict a ham sandwich is in the federal grand jury system, no defense attorneys are allowed. All that's presented is the prosecution side of the case, and all they have to do is establish probable cause to believe that someone committed the offense.
And one advantage that the federal prosecutors have is when they get the case and it comes to court, they've usually already worked the case up at the grand jury level. They know the case, inside and out, whereas the state prosecutor usually gets it after the person's arrested. So when the state prosecutor gets the case, usually, a smart defendant would hire their attorney at that point. So we're on the race with them. Whereas when you come into federal court, you need the most experienced federal attorney because the U.S. prosecutor is way ahead. He's had a huge head start. So catching up and getting, up to speed, you got to do that at light speed.
Yeah, an example is in the federal drug area that, was my specialty. We have taken sometimes 4 or 5 years of an investigation with multiple wiretaps, listening to people, gathering evidence, that type of thing, before we decide to bring the charge to the grand jury. So the prosecutor gets to basically formulate the case, plug any holes that they think are in the case before the charges are brought. Where, like Rajan said, in the state system, it's usually just dumped in the prosecutor's lap, and then they have to play catch up. Federally, we get to investigate and put our case together before charges are filed.
And do I know? So I'm not even a defendant at that point while the federal government's investigating, I guess. I'm just a suspect or whatever.
Yeah, they call it a subject or a target of the investigation.
Do I know what is going on at that time?
You know you're under investigation quite often.
How do I know? Do they send me a letter, an email, a Snapchat? How do I know?
Sometimes they may send a letter.
Yeah.
They may send a letter saying that you're a target of an investigation, and that's usually when they want you to cooperate. And they'll send a letter to the subject and ask them to come in with an attorney. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes I've had clients, just 6 in the morning. The feds are notorious for busting in the house early in the morning. They get their windows busted open.
Yeah, I see.
they get their house just raided on, and people are calling me frantic. And then the defendant is in court, usually for their first appearance, hours later. So it is so important, if you're ever a suspect in a federal case, you ever get that letter, do not ignore it. Do not ignore it.
Yeah.
Get on the phone, call us, because we handle all federal cases across the state.
Yeah, I mean, especially federal law. Like they're saying, if you are being investigated by any of the federal authorities, they're getting a head start on you, a head start on your attorney. If you get that letter, you just are asking any questions about anything, you've got to call the Joshi Law Firm, and do it right now, please. It's 321-282-1055. Now, gentlemen, might be a tough question. I don't know. Is it better as a defendant to be charged in state or federal court?
State court.
Okay.
In the process, in federal court, the agents are usually a lot more organized. The prosecutors are a lot more experienced. Whereas in state court, a lot of times when you're starting out, you're just starting out with a guy out of law school. Yeah. Not with the U.S. Attorney's Office. In addition, then the discovery process, what you're entitled to as the defense attorney, is open season in state court. I can take depositions in state court and really build my case up. In federal court, you can't take depositions. In federal court, you may not even find out who the witnesses are until the day of trial.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, and technically under the law, you don't even have to get a witness statement against you until after they've testified on direct examination. Now, that's generally not enforced because it would cause a lot of delays during the trial. But usually right before trial, you'll know what people are saying about you. And you don't, like Rajan said, you can't do depositions, you can't conduct discovery. You get what the government turns over to you.
What's a deposition again?
A deposition is, before the trial, you get to question the witnesses. You get to sit there and examine them. And this is usually where I destroy the case. I sit there and I question them, and if they said A to the police and they say B in the deposition, whatever they're going to say at trial, I'm going to have an inconsistent statement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that statement and make them sound as if they're lying. And it's an awesome weapon. If a lot of defense attorneys don't utilize it, I use that, as my spear and use it to defend my clients in felony cases. Whereas in federal court, we got to take what the government gives us. We don't get to question the witnesses under oath.
Doesn't seem fair to me, but I don't know. There must be a reason for it. Now, Rick, let me back to you. There's no advantage for you. I'm not trying to say that, but you essentially ran that office from the federal government perspective. Now
Yes.
you are defending federal defendants against that. You know the janitors in that building. How does that help you now advocate for your defendant clients in federal court?
Well, since I was a federal prosecutor, specifically in Orlando for a long time, you get to know the judges and all the court personnel. So you have a reputation with them. You're a known quantity going in. The judge is going to know that if I file a motion, there's merit to it, that I believe it's well-founded in the law. I'm not going to be filing frivolous motions. So it doesn't give you a special advantage knowing the judges and knowing the people, but what it does, it gives you an opportunity to present your argument and have them listen because they know you and they know that you're not going to bring something frivolous.
Rick goes into federal court with a cloth of credibility, and it's not only in Orlando, it's across the state.
Right.
When I get on the phone and I call a U.S. An assistant U.S. attorney to talk about a case, I mention my my co-counsel.
My best buddy
My
Rick,
buddy.
don't
Yes,
you?
yes, and then Rick and I will file that notice of appearance, and it catches people attention. Right there, they know of Rick Jancha. He ran the office. He's been doing this. He's practiced here. He's practiced in Illinois. He's a Notre Dame graduate.
All over the
so don't hold that against him. But he's got that reputation, and that's what you need. Because in federal court, you can't take and I mean no disrespect to other defense attorneys, but you can't take a defense attorney who just practices state court and expect them to go into federal court and do an adequate job in representing you. It will be an absolute ambush if you go into federal court without an experienced attorney. And there's no one more experienced than 4.5 decades.
One of the advantages of being experienced is when you talk to a prosecutor in a case, or the case agents, they know instantly whether or not you know what you're talking about.
Of course.
You don't ask stupid questions. You don't make crazy motions. They know that when you go in, you're going to fight the case for your client, and you're going to do it in the best possible way possible. And having been a former federal prosecutor, I know where some of the weaknesses lie, and where some of the things that I can gather ground on, what motions I can make to gather evidence. And
the procedural rules are so different in state court and federal court. In federal court, it's very formal. It's it's almost like you're going in there and you're going into a museum, and you've got to conduct yourself a certain way with a certain decorum that is required in federal court that isn't necessarily always seen in state court, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very, very strict in federal court. Like state court, you may have 50 cases all set at once. Federal court, one case at a time.
Yeah, if you have a federal issue, it's got to be a federal attorney, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be, but you really need someone who knows federal law, especially when you're getting charged with a crime. They're about to take your liberty away. Miss a deadline in federal court, see what happens, huh?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, he can be held in contempt of court,
it's
or
unbelievable.
they'll issue a show cause order on you.
Rick, what a pleasure to meet you, buddy. Rajan, as always, he's good. We got to get him back. So I feel like we just scratched the surface. I have so many more questions to ask.
You let me know, and he'll be here.
And congrats on 7 years. Proud of you, buddy.
Thank you.
And if you're charged with any crime, whether it's state or federal, you need to call someone now. Even when they're just calling you saying, oh, maybe you're a witness here. You need to get a lawyer. You need to get a lawyer at the beginning of the investigation. You will be forever grateful for that. 321-282-1055. When we return, it's local politic election season. Brittany Walker is running for Seminole County Commissioner. Let's see what does that job entail. When do you need to know your commissioner? When don't you need to know it? We'll talk about that and more. Quick break. It's Behind the Law.